All right. Hello, everyone. This is Brad Wood, and today I'm going to be talking to you about some CommandBox features to help when you're using SSL in your CommandBox server. So, the main goal of SSL is to encrypt the traffic to and from the user's browser and the server, and that makes sure that sensitive things that are in the URL, that are in the cookies, that are in the headers, that are in the request response, the request body, are all encrypted, so a man-in-the-middle attack can't, view that data. So what's pretty common is when you decide to use SSL on your site, usually you still have HTTP enabled, because if the user just types in yourdomain.com, that's going to connect by default over HTTP. And if you turn off HTTP, you'll get just a connection refused. So you usually have it connecting over HTTP and have some sort of redirect. A lot of people will do that redirect in Cold Fusion. There's even some like CommandBox modules in the past that'll force an SSL redirect. It's nice to be able to do that at the web server level, though. That way it can apply to static assets, and you don't have to worry about a code path in your Cold Fusion code that doesn't do that check and do the redirect. So let's set up a simple site real quick to test with, an SSL site. So I'm going to enable SSL. So web.ssl.enable equals true. I'm going to go ahead and have SSL on the default port. And by default, I mean the port your browser is going to expect it to be on. So 443. I'm also going to put our HTTP port over on port 80 as well. Web.http.port. Get that on port 80. This is kind of important because these redirects don't quite work when we run these on non-standard ports. And then I'm going to set a custom host. And this is so I don't completely confuse my web browser. I don't want to do this on localhost, and then it's going to be remembering redirects that I don't want to happen tomorrow when I'm just doing regular development. So the first setting to do, the first setting for us to test is found here. Server set web.ssl dot force SSL redirect equals true. So this is our first line of defense. And this basically looks for any GET request. It won't do anything to a post or a put because you'll lose the request body if you try to redirect. So any GET requests that come in, if they're over HTTP, it's going to send it back to the browser and say, hey, try again, but try that over HTTPS. So let's review what we've got going on here. I set a custom host just to have a dedicated domain for this little test. I've got HTTP on 80, SSL on 443. I've enabled SSL, and I'm telling it I want it to force all traffic over to SSL. So let's start up our server. All right, here we go. Tell my browser to ignore the fact that the self-signed cert does not apply to this domain name. Okay. So by default, CommandBox opened up our HTTPS URL because it assumes we want that. So let me just go specifically type in http://myssltest.com. And if we look down here, our first request came back with a 301 redirect, and the location header is sending us over to HTTPS. Perfect. All right, so this works. The downside, though, is the first time a user goes to your website and they just type in yourdomain.com, they still have an initial unencrypted trip over the internet, over HTTP, before the redirect first kicks in. And this is where HSTS comes into play. This stands for Strict Transport Security, and the goal of HSTS is to train your browser to remember this domain and say, always and forever, only use HTTPS with this domain. Don't even send a request over HTTP. I don't want to see it. Don't even make me redirect you. Don't even come at me unless you get HTTPS. That's what HSTS does. And so we can enable it like so. Server set web.ssl web.ssl dot HSTS dot enable equals true. All right, there's a few other settings that are supported. There's an include subdomains, which tells the browser to apply this to all subdomains as well. and there's also a max age. Generally speaking, the default max age is just a huge, giant, long span of time because you probably aren't planning on moving away from SSL at some point in the future. You probably just want browsers to remember this forever and ever. So I will not specify either of those. And let's restart our ColdFusion server to pick up this setting. So all that the HSTS setting really does in CommandBox is it adds a server rule that adds an automatic HTTP response header to every request. And what's nice about this is you could do it in ColdFusion, but it would only apply to ColdFusion pages. This will add the header into everything, including static files, and you're really supposed to have it on every response. Okay, so our server's coming back up. So if I refresh, let me clear out our debugger. If I refresh, we can now see that there is a response header being included by our site, and it's called strict transport security, and our default max age is just some ridiculously large number. This tells our browser that we always want to use HTTPS for all future traffic for mySSLtest.com, right? It's kind of hard to get your browsers to forget this, so when you're playing around with this, this is partially why I used a custom domain name to test this, because your browser will remember this quite aggressively for this many days, actually. Okay, so now that our browser has seen that header, our browser should remember that we never want to use HTTP again. So if I take off the HTTPS and just hit mySSLtest.com, we can see there is no redirect that kicked in. In fact, my browser didn't even send an HTTP request. It said, wait a minute, I remember this domain. I'm only supposed to use SSL for this domain. And behind the scenes, even though I didn't type HTTPS, Chrome automatically slapped the HTTPS on there because it saw that strict transport security header in the past, and it knows this domain only uses HTTPS. So this is the best because it means that your user's very first hit to your site, even if they don't type in HTTPS : / will automatically be HTTPS because we've got that strict transport security turned on. So that's how that works. Both of those are pretty quick and easy to turn on, and they all kind of fall under the category of secure by default stuff that we want to be able to turn on quickly and easily in CommandBox. So feel free to play with that for any SSL enabled websites that you are hosting out there behind CommandBox. And have a good one.